The proper response to "you're a racist" is not, "let me explain to you 10 reasons why I'm not a racist." That's a losing argument. The proper response is, right, that's the actual proper response.
I have a question regarding the national identity. So although President Trump took office in Washington, D.C., here globalist elites in Europe are actually trying to erode our national sovereignty by mass migration and by open border policies. And my question to you is, what do you think, what is the best way for European conservatives to reassert our national identities? And thank you so much in advance.
It's a great question. I mean, I think number one place where Hungary clearly has led Europe is in reasserting its national identity, specifically with regard to rejecting mass migration from areas that absolutely reject Western civilization as a whole. And you guys are paying, I believe, something like €1 million a day for the privilege right now, thanks to the predations of the European Union. I think that you are starting to see a rising tide that is going to reject mass migration. That rising tide is happening in France. It's obviously happening in Germany. It's actually happened in Denmark, where a left-wing party has radically restricted immigration. So I think that the era of open migration is over. There's one area where the prime minister, he was ahead of his time. He took an enormous amount of flack for doing what Hungary did. And time has proved him right. And nations that refuse to protect their own border are nations that are going to suffer for it. And the populations of those nations know it. Now, obviously, there are people in a variety of powerful roles who are attempting to stop democracy from actually working in many of these countries. You'll see an upsurge in right-wing or conservative or anti-mass immigration sentiment, and then it will sort of be shoveled off to the side because no one really wants to talk about it, but you can only suppress that for so long. That situation for, supposedly center-right or center-left parties that are siding with the radical left on these issues, eventually the lid is going to blow off of that jar, and what's going to come out is going to be the sentiment of Europeans that they do not actually wish to have their cultures discarded in favor of a failed multiculturalism that has destroyed every state it's touched.
Hi, Ben. Malka, fellow Orthodox Jew, and my question was, we have 10 kids, and we moved out of the States because of how intense and invasive the woke culture has gotten in the States. And my question is, how do you think Donald Trump, if he can stall this decline in the US, if he can reinstate conservative values, what do you think? What is your opinion on this?
So I do think that woke culture is on kind of its last legs in the United States. By this I mean that 10 years ago, when I was saying that boys are not girls, I was nearly kicked off of every social media platform. Now, that is actual government policy from the White House on down. And I think that there's been a very harsh reaction to the woke philosophy, which essentially suggests, in essence, that every disparity in outcome is due to discrimination. That if one group does worse than another group, it must be because the system is designed in order to harm that group. I think the American people are tired of that. I think that's why some of the most popular stuff that President Trump has done is taking on, for example, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is just wokeness, or taking on the trans agenda in the United States, which again is really unpopular in the United States. I think that wokeness has a real problem on its hands. Now, the thing that I'm fearful of is that all the good that President Trump is doing, how long does it last? Right? Is there a reversion back to woke in the aftermath of President Trump? And the answer there is going to be determined by how successful President Trump is on sort of the baseline governance things. If the economy remains very strong, I think wokeness is in serious trouble for the long haul. If the economy were to tank, and now it's a package deal where you get a sort of left-wing populism that surges along with the wokeness, you could get a package deal where wokeness rears its ugly head all over again. So I think I don't think you can wipe out wokeness in a single moment. I think the attempt to do so is laudable, but I think that a movement that took, decades to build is usually not destroyed inside of a couple of years. It's going to take a more long-term, vision of how to keep that at bay. But I do think the American people are very, very tired of it. So let's put it this way. I'm significantly more optimistic about the death of wokeness than I was, say, 3 years ago.
Hi, Ben. I'm here. It's an honor to ask you. My name is Balázs, and my question is the following. Secularism has hollowed out the spiritual core of the Western civilization. How can conservatism survive in such conditions in a godless culture? And how can we actively reintroduce the Judeo-Christian value set to our society, sociology. So the societies to restore order and the real meaning.
So, I mean, the answer is that Western civilization cannot survive full-scale secularism and godlessness, and that's what we've been watching. And the restoration of church is the fundamental basis of a restoration of the West. I say this as a Jew. Everybody who grew up in a Christian household and whose grandparents were Christian needs to go to church. Everyone. It is deeply, deeply important that they go to church and re-engage with their religious heritage and re-engage with God and re-engage with an absolute morality that suggests that there is a right and that there is a wrong. Because again, all the things that I just talked about spring from those biblical values. And there is no substitute for it. And I think that's why you're seeing actually in the United States an increase in religious adherence among young people. For the first time in my lifetime, it was going in one direction. It was going down into the right. And now it's moving up again. And the reason is because it turns out that a life that's filled with secularism eventually becomes hollow. And not for everybody. There's some people who can lead fulfilled lives of their own making. But the reality is that for a broad population, finding meaning in a meaningless universe is incredibly difficult, if not impossible. And for a civilization, it's actually just impossible. Because to slide from secularism to nihilism is not much of a slide. But if you actually want to, for example, have a civilization that has children, I mean, this is what every statistic shows. Religious adherence and having lots of kids go hand in hand. You are not going to restore natalism in the West without having people go to church. It's just not going to happen. You have to have a national mission. You have to have a godly mission. It's why the only country actually in the West that currently has above replacement rates of population growth is Israel, because it's a country that is largely religious. Even the secular people in Israel have some semblance of religion. And also because they're surrounded by enemies on all sides, and that means that they feel the actual patriotic necessity to have kids. That sort of thing can be restored, but you have to have civilizational pride, and that civilizational pride is rooted in a belief in a higher power that demands something of you. Also, the success of Western civilization rests on a very simple principle, which is, if you fail, it's probably your own fault. Every failed civilization is rooted in the opposite, that if you fail, it's somebody else's fault. But successes in life and successful civilizations say that freedom exists so that if you fail, you're the one to blame. That's what religion says. What the Bible says, all over the Bible, is if you fail, that's not God's fault, that's your fault. You did it. And that means you need to take responsibility for your life and make it better. And without that, it's very easy to slide into the morass. So I think there's a reason why people are going back to church, thank God. I think that there's a God-shaped hole in people's hearts that was opened up by secularism. People have tried to fill that hole with everything from pornography to chatbots to just the internet itself, or to rage and political polarization. None of that fills the God-shaped hole. The only thing that fills the God-shaped hole is God. We'll get some more on that in a moment. First, I need to make sure that I'm maintaining my health, hitting the gym, spending time with the family, even with the busy work schedule. When I was younger, I used to think I could just power through on willpower and caffeine. I learned pretty quickly peak performance requires peak nutrition, and that means actually eating vegetables. But I don't like vegetables, so I'm very thankful to have Balance of Nature, which fits right into even the busiest of days. Imagine trying to eat 31 different fruits and veggies every day, which sounds miserable, time-consuming. With Balance of Nature fruits and veggies, there's never been a more convenient dietary supplement to ensure you get a wide variety of fruits and veggies daily. Balance of Nature takes fruits and veggies, they freeze-dry them, they turn them into a powder, and then they put them into a capsule. You take your fruit and veggie capsules every day, and then your body knows precisely what to do with them. It's kosher, so I can pop it right into the protein smoothie, and I'm good to go. Head on over to balanceofnature.com, use promo code Shapiro for 35% off your first order as a preferred customer. Plus, get that free bottle of fiber and spice. That's balanceofnature.com, promo code Shapiro. Go check them out right now. Balanceofnature.com, promo code Shapiro for 35% off your very first order as a preferred customer, and get a free bottle of fiber and spice.
Hi, Ben. Welcome to Hungary. My question is regarding J.D. Vance's Naval Academy speech that you also covered on your show earlier this week, I think. What do you think is the meaning behind the sort of strategic shift of U.S. foreign policy and diplomacy that he spoke in length about? Thank you.
So the question is about the shift in American foreign policy and what it represents right now. I will say that I think there are multiple strains of foreign policy that are currently playing out simultaneously inside the Trump administration, and the result is a lot of uncertainty. I'm not sure that anyone has sort of a solid read on what the next move from the Trump administration will be in, say, Ukraine, or with regard to Israel, or with regard to Iran, with regard to China. Right? There are a bunch of strains that are competing. So the speech that you mentioned, J.D. Vance's speech at the Naval Academy, what he was rejecting was, I think, a straw man that's been burned 20 years ago, essentially. He's saying that we will no longer engage in the sort of interventionist Wilsonian philosophy that led to the war in Iraq. I'm not sure how many Americans at this point raise their hand when you say, if you know then what you know now, would you go to war in Iraq? Like, how many hands go up? The answer is probably 0. So he's fighting against an impulse that no longer exists in the American body politic. The question is, what does he mean practically? And so I've always believed that President Trump understands peace through strength, which was sort of Trump 1.0, which was, we don't have interests in every conflict all along the globe. We don't have to get involved in every conflict. But where we do have interests, we have to muscularly defend those interests. And the only thing, in some cases, that defends those interests is the credible threat of use of force. And that's why, for example, when it comes to Ukraine, I've taken the position that President Trump is right that he wants to get to an off-ramp. I've been calling for an off-ramp in Ukraine since August of 2022. But if you actually want to get Vladimir Putin to an off-ramp, you actually need to up the pressure on Putin, because Zelensky right now is actually giving Trump everything he wants. He gave him a 30-day ceasefire. He's giving him the rare earth minerals deal. He's giving him the possibility of a face-to-face negotiation with Putin, no preconditions. And Putin, meanwhile, is doing none of those things. And so the only way to get Putin to the table, presumably, is to up the ante on the pressure with an eye toward an off-ramp. Now, is that something that J.D. Vance wants? I have no idea. I have no idea what J.D. wants. I'm not sure what the president's foreign policy is. With regard to Ukraine, it seems to shift fairly frequently. And again, there's something to strategic ambiguity, but there's a point where strategic ambiguity, like, you don't know what he's going to do next, so don't screw with this guy. There's a point where strategic ambiguity shifts over into just pure uncertainty. And America's enemies can take uncertainty as a sign of weakness, and that's one of my concerns.
Hi, Ben. You often emphasize facts and logic. And you've already mentioned in your speech that many of our opponents operate purely on an emotional and pseudo-moralistic level. So do you think that the right should embrace moral and emotional arguments more strategically in order to win the cultural war? Thank you.
I mean, I think that's a great question. So I frequently say facts don't care about your feelings, but the response very frequently is in feelings don't care about your facts, which is very often true. People are making emotional arguments. You cite a fact at them. They ignore the fact because they feel a particular way about a particular issue. Should we be making more emotionally laden arguments? I mean, the answer is absolutely sometimes. I mean, what my hope would be that the emotional argument comes atop a layer of facts. It's sort of a pie in which the crust of the pie, the base of the pie, is going to be the facts. And then you do have to put in some emotional content that appeals to the heartstrings if you hope to actually foster a positive agenda sometimes, because, of course, people are emotional creatures, and ignoring that would be a strategic mistake. So I agree with that. I think that when the emotions substitute for the facts, that's where I start to lose it. And I'm not sure that that's only a left-wing phenomenon. I think it's a universal human phenomenon. You sometimes see this on the right, which is why the right will drift into sort of conspiracy theories. They'll say, I don't care about the facts. There must be somebody who's attempting to screw me. It's probably the small cadre of people. And, you know, if there's no facts to back that, I'm very uninterested in that take. If there are facts to back it, now you're talking about something completely different. So, I think you're right. The foundation has to be facts. But, yeah, sure, you're going to have to build some sort of emotional superstructure atop that if you hope to be convincing.
Hi, Ben. I'm Shalom. I'm a big fan. And my question is about what people like to call lately the woke right. So, as we all see and all observe in the last 2 years since the war began in Israel, that more and more pretty prominent conservative voices in America started to say sometimes subtle, sometimes not as subtle, and quite explicit anti-Semitic stuff. And for me, as an Israeli Jew, that's pretty worrying, because I always saw the conservative movement in America as a natural ally. So my question is, how much of a percentage does that represent of conservatives in America? How much are you worried about it? And how do you think we should reply, or we should deal with this new phenomenon?
So, first of all, I'm not a huge fan of the term woke right, because I think that it obscures more than it illuminates. And so I'll try to be very specific about who I think you're talking about, and you tell me if I'm wrong. I think that the philosophy of the people that you are referring to essentially says that there is, just like the left, a group of people who are put upon, and that group of people who are put upon by an elite cadre of people. Here they will often name check Jews or Israelis or Israeli foreign aid, and that's what's making their life bad. So that in the same way that the left will argue that every disparity is in fact discrimination, that every thing that is unequal between two parties must be because someone is harming the other party. The right is doing some of that same stuff, but their victim group is different. So the left might say that it's blacks in America. The right might say that it's white Appalachian people in America. But the similarity is in the idea that there is a victim group and a victimizer group, and success is an indicator of victimizer status. And so is that a problem on the right? Absolutely. I mean, you can see sort of a populist right that edges toward that and veers directly into it more than a little these days. I don't like that, along any lines. I think that it's very bad. How popular is it? I think some of it is being bolstered, frankly, by algorithmic problems at places like TikTok, which is a Chinese spy app, or like at certainly X. X is being gamed by malign actors. There's no question that's the case. So how popular is it in reality? Not particularly popular with the American people generally. It is increasingly popular with young people who are being told, after years and years of being lied to by the elites, that the elites can never be trusted, and the only people you can trust are people who posit conspiracy theories. And the logic goes something like, the elitists told us something was false, and they were lying. And I told you the truth because I said they were lying. That means I'm telling you the truth about literally everything, and there's a conspiracy behind everything that I am also uncovering. That sort of conspiracy theorizing, that just asking questions that I've criticized so frequently. The purpose of a question should be to elicit an answer. The purpose of a question should be to elicit a fact. If you're just asking questions because what you actually hope to do is seed doubt about people in the minds of other people, not based on fact, but based on sort of a malignant hatred, then yeah, I'm obviously very much worried about that. I think you see it very often. I mean, I spoke about this at length last week, actually. When people suggest that Israel's committing a genocide, for example, in the Gaza Strip, which is an absurdity on every level. There is literally no definition of a genocide that fits what's going on in the Gaza Strip right now. There has never been a genocide in which the supposedly genocidal party somehow increases the population of the group that it's genociding. That has never happened in that has not fed that group to the tune of hundreds of trucks per day while that group is holding hostages. Like, it makes no sense. If you're participating in that lie, there must be some sort of ulterior motive that is not factually driven.
Hello, Mr. Shapiro. My question is about how across all of the West, art, literature, and history are constantly being rewritten in the name of decolonization. And what can we conservatives personally do to protect our culture without being called a racist or a bigot?
I mean, so I've said this for a long time. I think my entire career. The proper response, very often, I'll go to a campus, somebody will call me a racist, or I'm on a show and somebody calls you a racist. The proper response to you're a racist is not, let me explain to you 10 reasons why I'm not a racist. That's a losing argument. The proper response is, right, that's the actual proper response. If somebody calls you a racist, the proper response is to flip them the bird or to tell them to F off, like that. And the reason for that is because what they are doing there is maligning it. That's not an argument. That's a character assassination. And you can't fight back against a character assassination by legitimizing the person who's actually making the argument. The minute that you start defending yourself, oh, I'm not a racist, and let me tell you all the reasons why I'm not a racist, what you're actually saying is, you're a reasonable person who's calling me a racist, which means that it's reasonable for you to call me a racist or to think that I'm a racist, which means that maybe I'm a racist. There's no reason to even humor the argument. So I think the first thing that the West has to do when it comes to many of these arguments is to throw the bird. Is say, you have no evidence of this. Not only do you have no evidence of this, it makes you a schmuck to actually make this argument and to character assassinate people that you know nothing about and against all available fact patterns. Right? It is okay to simply reject out of, you do not have to make a logical retort to an insult. In fact, a logical retort to an insult is typically ineffective. The only actual appropriate response to an insult is to take umbrage and to either walk away or to engage on the same level that somebody's insulting you. All right, one more question.
Hi, Mr. Shapiro. I have a question regarding the relationship of Israel and Germany. The new German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, who is a conservative, says he does no longer understand what Israel is doing in Gaza and that the war cannot be explained with the fight against Hamas anymore. I wonder how dangerous is this for Israel, and are Europe and especially Germany still on Israel's side?
I mean, obviously it's not good for Israel that so many of the European powers have decided that basically they are fine with Hamas regaining control of the Gaza Strip. And I'd recommend to the Chancellor that if he has a good plan for Gaza, he should table it right now. because I've heard zero plans from anyone that are actually practical or practicable in the Gaza Strip. There's a reason that no country in the region will take the Palestinians. There is a reason for that, and it is because the Palestinian population, by polling data, by literally all polling data, is heavily terror supportive. And many countries don't want that in their country, and I think rightly so. The notion that Israel is supposed to sort of leave and then leave Hamas as the governing power in the Gaza Strip is insane. Obviously, no one is positing any other solutions, including the chancellor. So my response to that is always the same. The minute that you posit an actual practical plan that doesn't involve Hamas actually running the place again, redeveloping all of its terror tunnels, firing rockets into Israel, attacking its neighbors, and oppressing its own people, while, by the way, still holding Israeli hostages, the minute you come up with that plan, I'm happy to hear it. Otherwise, you should shut up. All right, bye. Everybody, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Well, that's all for now, folks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts down below. Be sure to check out all of the other great content on my channel. I'll see you here next time.